So Ellen, what do you do? What's your job?
I this is what I tell people. Even people who approach me who know nothing about me, I say, I teach computer applications for translators and German to English translation.
Good.
I specialize in scientific and technical translation.
Okay.
I teach machine tools. I teach translation memories, and above all, terminology management. And
Okay.
people ask me, what's terminology management? And I talk about special languages,
Okay.
specific
Let's.
disciplines.
Wait a minute.
Where do you work?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I work at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio,
Okay.
which is, that's not the first thing I think of when I think about what I do.
Yeah. But in the United States, that's incredibly important, I think, for translation studies.
Sure,
This
sure.
is
Yeah.
the major
Yeah.
center, I think,
Yeah.
for translation
The-
studies.
I guess the reason I think of the very specifics about what I do is that I've been doing that far longer than I've been at Kent State. So
Okay.
my personal identity is I was an early tools developer. My husband and I developed the first PC-based terminology management system.
When was that?
That's mid-'80s. We
Okay.
were working with Alan Melby,
Yeah.
and we developed a product called Mercury Termets. It was marketed for many years in North America and Europe. And as things evolved, Multiterm and the SDL, what is now
Okay,
SDL, overstripped what we could keep up with
All right.
developer-wise. But we actually had some input in how they developed Multiterm. So it was
Okay,
not
so
that...
part of multi-term we can
Yeah,
go back
yeah.
to.
A lot of
okay,
the
right.
basic things you see in the term entry, we actually developed long ago.
Where were you when you did that then?
We were living and working as freelance translators in
Okay.
Cleveland.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
Alan Melby was in.
Alan Melby was out
Utah.
in Provo, Utah.
Yeah.
And what happened was my husband was an early adapter so far as computerization was concerned.
Mhm.
And he dreamed of this notion of being able to do his terminology management and translate at the same time. And Alan Melby, people referred him to Alan and said, we can do that. I won't go into
That was
the
with the
details. We don't
translator's
have time.
workstation.
Exactly.
models of that
The
at beginning,
envision
right.
of his envision of the translator's workstation, which came before the evolution of the PC. We actually developed it for the PC, but we had the idea before that.
Okay. How did you get... No, look, when you were 22, 23, 24,
Oh, okay.
what were you doing?
I was
you're
a student of Germanic languages.
Not terminology, not technology.
No. But
Okay.
I was a terminologist forever. I was sitting with Barbara Ingerkosh, who you may know. She's a terminologist, was head of the terminology group for Microsoft for a long time.
Mhm.
And we and her friend were talking about the fact that we were terminologists from childhood. My grandmother walked me around on Cheyenne Mountain and said, "This is feldspar. This is granite." So
Terminologists are born, not made.
I had to know the names of all the weeds in the yard,
All
and
right.
you just knew the names. My father was a scientist. My mother was a second grade teacher,
Okay.
and you had to know the names of
Okay,
things.
but you still had to get from German studies into
Yes.
The technology thing. How did
Okay,
that work?
how that happened was it's a question of history. My husband and I both did our dissertations at Washington University in St. Louis, which is a wonderful school. And when we finished, at the time we finished, it was in a period after the Vietnam War when in the United States, after the big Sputnik rush to train people in science and
What years are we in?
we're talking at that point it's 1971
Yeah,
to
yeah.
1975.
Right.
All of a sudden, certain aspects of the humanities, studying philosophy, studying foreign language, this is irrelevant. We want to go with real world stuff.
Mhm.
And universities and colleges all over the country dropped foreign language requirements. So after being paid to become, I had a government scholarship to become a professor of foreign language because that was essential to the national security. But then, when you get done, I don't know how many of my colleagues who became translators were NSF scholars.
Okay.
So I began doing little bits of translation. My husband went to work for a major engineering company. He was a Hispanist, but also a Romance scholar. He did Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and French into English, and he brought the German home to me. And we both had backgrounds. Our fathers were either scientists or engineers, and we loved this stuff.
Okay.
So that's how we became translators, and then we got involved developing the terminology management, and I met Christian Galinsky, who was at that time head of Infoterm and TermNet, and I started doing stuff with the TermNet people, and so that's how I became a terminologist.
There are plenty of women in terminology, but not so many in the technology side of things, or is that a false characterization?
I don't know, because technology is my deal. The area where I come from, the Cleveland area, is what we call the second city, because Detroit and Cleveland are the home of the auto industry. And one of the things I discovered as I became a technical translator, when my husband was working for an engineering company, I discovered that I just love machine tools. I love machines. And I started to work for a machine tool company that manufactures parts for the automotive industry. And it was the greatest thing. They said, we want you to take the blueprint course. And I said, what? And they said, you have to be able to read blueprints. And I said, well, duh. I learned to read blueprint. I learned to read before I was 5. I learned to read blueprints before I was 8. What's the big deal?
Right.
Because there was always drawings lying around and stuff. And my dad said, well, this is this is that. So it just was normal. And I started maintaining company terminology management, and it just sort of grew.
Over the years, you've seen the translation technologies change a lot.
Absolutely.
And the tools for
and
terminology
it's changing right
with
now.
them. Yeah.
That's what I've been doing here is finding out.
Is it getting better for translators?
Yeah. Which is I don't know whether you know that German word.
Yeah, yes and no together, right?
It's. I think it is. Ellen likes to say that translators will not be overtaken by machine translation. Translation not will be overtaken by machine translation. It will be taken over by translators who know how to use the tools. And I teach the tools. I'm constantly trying to learn what's going on in the new tools. That's what I've been doing here, spending time with the guys who are developing the hybrid systems that do MT and TM at the same time. And the important thing, what I see in some of the interfaces. Now I don't advertise.
MTTM is machine translation and translation memories.
Exactly, exactly. But just in general, the latest versions, for instance, of SDL are so much more user-friendly for the translator. Yeah. Things are in more appropriate places. We have programs like MemoQ, which everyone thinks is really easy to use. So we have...
But that's getting better.
Yeah, exactly. So what's happening is people are looking... Now, the big one that I'm working on right now, my project for the near term, is the fact that the tools are not user-friendly for Arabic. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of Arabic students, and I have students who are really
or any right-left language.
Of course, but it's more than that. Yeah. It's not just the right-left language. It's the way the interface is presented. It's if maybe you sat down with an Arabic student using your own computer and seeing how the programs present in the Arabic interface, it's not well done. There are issues. So I don't want to go into the issues, but I'm interested in. I'm talking to SDL and some of the other tools developers to see what we could do to get a consortium going to meet the needs of the Arabic translator.
Okay. You're known in translation studies as the author of a 2-volume
it's old.
Reference work.
I
was wondering.
Some of it's still great, some of it's outdated.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem in this field. It changes so fast that when we get around to doing a book or a textbook, it's going to age. But is that worth updating, or should lessons be online, or what do we do these days?
Is doing some new handbooks, and I would look to that direction. They're not being done by me. Yeah. And part of the problem is that Gerhard Budin, with whom I did the book, and I have gotten so involved in research in very specific areas that we haven't wanted to come back and do that kind of thing again.
But do you think there's a need for something like that?
There's definitely a need because, and I think Benjamin's is trying to meet that need.
Okay.
They have their first volume out, and Klaus Schmitz is doing a new volume.
When you're teaching this at Kent State, which is a big show, I mean, you've got undergrad, masters, and doctorate, right?
Yes.
Do you get resistance from students saying, I'm here to learn how to translate, not to use tools?
It's not necessarily resistance. And I've got to think of this in English. They're just taken aback.
Ah, okay.
They are shocked. They come in and they discover they're coming here. They love language. They're coming now. Some of them already know tools. There are different. And one of the problems is the delta factor between those who really know a lot already and those who know nothing. And they are just
flummoxed.
Yeah, flummoxed. That's a good word. That's a wonderful word. That's exactly the word we're looking for. They're because I'm a nice person and have a reputation for being a nice person. They can't be too bad to me, except for the occasional jerk, and everybody rolls those folks off. But we only have one right now, but don't worry about it. They are just aghast that we are throwing all this technical stuff at them. It's very difficult, and of course, in learning it, in the early stage of the learning curve, it takes a lot of time, and they don't see how in the world all this effort is going to make it easier or less time-consuming.
Yeah.
Because the first stages, and I tell people, you're not going to. We have this wonderful graph. Kola did this wonderful graph of the break-even point, where if it just continues on the line where it is, cost and time just keep growing. But if you build your resources and learn your skills, then it evens off.
You need that tipping point.
Exactly. You need that transition point where the curves intersect, and now it's costing you less effort. But in that early stage, it seems very challenging. And, of course, it's hard.
But you get students to that realization.
We try.
Okay.
And we have so much. There's so much packed into this program. They come in and we say, you have to know Studio well. Not Studio, you have to know...
Turtle Studio.
Well, no, they're not talking about Turtles. We say you have to know Microsoft's, and it's not Studio, but the Word, PowerPoint...
Office.
Microsoft Office. Extremely well.
But the younger they are, the better they are these days. Sure.
The Europeans, that's true of the Europeans and the Americans. They come in, they know Word pretty well. They know, a lot of them have worked with Excel. We have students coming in from other parts of the world who are, again, flummoxed by, and not even sure what you do with some of these tools.
Okay.
And we teach them HTML because it's the easiest way for us to teach them coding and how coding works. I tell them, you can complain about HTML, but I don't have time to teach you C++. And some of them don't even know what C++ is. But the important thing is that they come out at the end being able to use the tools. Our people go directly into project management positions. They become freelance translators. They become terminologists sometimes. And this is a bit pejorative for other programs, but what people tell me, the people who come out of Monterey Institute and Kent State come into an internship, and people say, this is what we're doing. I say, fine, sit down and do it. And this is not always the case with students coming from all parts of the world, even some very developed countries.
Sure.
I won't name names. I've worked with some interns coming from very prestigious universities who didn't walk in and say, yes, I know this.
No, to be honest, in the United States, it's been far more restrictive. You've had these two very good centers.
Yes.
Then you've had comparative literature doing translation.
Yes.
But the training of professional translators and interpreters has been very restricted.
It's
very
growing.
professionally oriented.
There are small programs, and part of the problem is that traditional language and literature programs either don't want to have anything to do with what we do or are very resistant. And for instance, the program at University of Baltimore is coming out of a communications department.
Yeah.
And you probably know that. And of course, MIIS stands alone. It was an independent entity, and now it's owned by Middlebury, but Middlebury is off there on the other side of the continent. That doesn't mean that they don't have some constraints now, but Middlebury has always understood the language enterprise.
Yeah.
So
sure.
it's not like they got bought out by somebody who didn't know what was
it's
going
a very
on.
good union.
Yeah. So it's a good match. But there are, particularly in Spanish and in community interpreting, and in the Milwaukee area in German, there are pockets where there are good programs.
Okay. Good.
But they're not. You don't have anything the full scale, full out activity that you have in MIS in Kent.
Last question. This is for would-be doctoral students.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
What needs some research in this area? Just the general ideas.
Okay.
That's not being done.
We do all kinds of empirical research. Mm-hmm. We're heavy into a kind of research that a lot of people who come in as doctoral students don't even know about. In fact, it's very typical that when people make their application and they define what they think they want to do, that what they end up doing is totally different. I have, for instance, some people are very focused on going back to wherever they came from and teaching. For instance, I have a lovely guy from Saudi Arabia who has discovered that we do shadowing, mentoring, and internships, and they're not doing anything like that. So he's developing a whole system for identifying the interests that students have in order to put them in programs where they're taking a minor in something, and then getting them out into which we've been doing in Monterey and Kent for a long time, but it's totally new.
Okay.
And so he's modeling that. We have people who are doing literary topics. We have.
For what do we need? That's not being done. What knowledge?
It's not being done.
Would you like to see people with in the technology?
I tend to choose these, help students focus on their topic, and
actually,
it's hard. What do you want to do? What are your interests? What do you want to do?
You're not somebody who says, I need someone to research this.
Well, in a way, I was just, we were just talking about, you remember before we came down here, and I was talking to the Russian lady who was telling me about a set of terminology that they have for community interpreting. We need more research into how to collect that kind of information and disseminate it, and to vet it. Vetting is very difficult, and in community interpreting, you have to deal with the variations in language, particularly not so much in Russian, and we don't have it in German, but in Arabic and Spanish in particular in this country. There's all kinds of research to be done.
Yeah.
But there's no end of. We do corpus studies in a vast, and of course that impinges on what I was talking about too. Corpus studies in a wide array of different applications. So I have a brilliant student who is a project manager. He's not really interested in teaching at the moment. He's vying for a high-level project services position with an LSP and probably making more money than you or I.
It's not hard for me.
As a starter salary.
Yeah.
But he is looking at, his research question is, what's up with project management? Why do we see the attrition that we see in project management? Why do project managers become dissatisfied?
Sure.
Why do companies become dissatisfied with project managers? What can we do to model the profession in a way that would improve the profession and turn project management into a true professional career path?
Good. Nice one.
That's kind of
like workplace studies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the ideas. Thank you very much.
That one's taken.